26 is 71. 6.
Sorry. Can everybody hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yes. Good. Okay, good. So we're good. So I'll restart. So again, welcome everybody to today's webinar series. This is our third or fourth session. This is, I think, our third session. So today we're going to be discussing file systems and data transfers. We'll be talking about some available software that we have on the system, and then ways that you can have software installed or install it yourself. Today's session is the fourth session that we've had. We have one more scheduled for next Friday on August the 10th. If you found these useful and you'd like to do more of these, just let me know. You can either send me an email or you can drop something in the chat box on this session. If there's other things you'd like for us to explore and do more of these webinars, just let me know and we can keep on moving forward with these. If not, our last scheduled one is next week, and then that'll conclude this webinar series. Again, if you guys want more, just let me know. Today we'll be talking about file systems and data transfer and then available software. So to get started, let's start talking about the file systems that we have in the ACF. So our largest file system that we have is the Haven system. It's 3 petabytes raw, and by the time you format it, it's about 1.7 petabytes of usable. That's 1.7 quadrillion bytes worth of usable space on the machine. It is Lustre-based, and Lustre is a high-performance parallel file system. The vendor that we get Haven from is DDN, Data Direct Networks. They're a large provider of high-performance file systems, so we use them a lot for our large storage systems, particularly like for Scratch. Your home directories live on our NFS-based drives, and those are just basic commodity drive enclosures. I believe ours are from Dell, for instance. We have about 15 terabytes worth of space for home directories. That's one of the reasons that we put quotas on home directories, is because it's not a very large space. So we have a lot of users, and if they store a lot of data in their home directories, that system would fill up very fast. So the areas that you have available to you, this first of all is your home directories. Your home directories are when you first log in, that's where you get dropped into. The path to that is your home/, and that $user means your username. So there is an environment variable called a user, and you can access that through $user. But just remember, when you see $user, it's really talking about your username on the system. So that is an NFS-based system. You have a 10 gigabyte quota. It is not purged, so that means that data will just kind of stay there forever. We don't go through and remove that data. And we do provide backups for that. So if something does happen, there is a backup of the home directories. On the scratch space, you can find that at /luster, /haven, /user, and then your username. Again, that $user means your username. It is a Lustre based. There is no quota on it, so you can store as much as you want to in the system. It is purged, which means that if there's any data that's been unused and it's been there sitting there for 30 days or longer, it is subject to being purged. Now, it's not guaranteed that it's going to disappear, but then it's also not guaranteed that it's going to remain there. And the reason we have to purge that file system is that if the system starts to get too full, let's say it gets 80% full, 85%, 95% full, the whole performance of the system starts slowing down. Jobs start to slow down or fail. People have a hard time copying data back and forth, and they can't get to their data. The whole performance of the entire system is really hinged on the performance of how that Lustre-based file system is working. So to keep it from being too utilized, overutilized, periodically we'll go through, and any data that's not been touched or used within the last 30 days is subject to being deleted. Now, we don't do any backups because that's a lot of data to backup. So it's nearly impossible, or it's at least cost prohibitive to try and back up 1.7 petabytes worth of data, a lot of which is just temporary scratch data that you're not going to use long term. So we don't back it up. It's just too cost prohibitive to do that, which means if we do go through and purge data, once it's deleted, it is gone forever. There is no getting it back, unfortunately. Now, if you're using that data periodically and you use it on a daily basis or a weekly basis and you are accessing it and using it, then it's not going to be subject to the purge. This is only going to apply to data that has not been used within 30 days. So it's old data. Again, don't store anything important that you're just going to store long term. We occasionally do get tickets into our help system saying, hi, I'm a PhD student and I've stored all of my dissertation material in a scratch directory, and I only touch it about once every 6 months and it's gone now. Well, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get it back for them. So make sure that any important data that you've got to have, that you've stored it somewhere else, either offsite or someplace nice and safe. Now, we do have project directory space that's also available. So it's in Lustre, Haven, Project, and then your project ID, whatever that happens to be. It might be ACF-UTHSC 0011 or something like that, whatever it happens to be. You can request that space. You don't get that space automatically, but that space can be requested. It is stored in Haven, so it is a Lustre-based file system that gets stored in. The quota will vary. It'll depend. So normally it doesn't have any quota. However, if you need that data to be around and persistent and not purged, then you can purchase that service. So we do have a service that you can purchase persistent storage, which means we're not going to purge it. So there in the column where it says, is it purged or not, it really depends on the investment level that a particular group or an institution has put into their storage. Backup, that also depends as well. You can purchase backup of that persistent data. So if your group does have some funding and they do have a need for some persistent data, we do have that option, and we can talk to you about how the mechanics of that will work. But as just a user, you have space in your home directory, and again, it's got a quota of 10 gigabytes, and you can store anything you want in your scratch directory, and just remember, it is subject to being purged and it is not backed up. So any critical data that you can't live without, just be careful that you're either utilizing it periodically within that 30-day window, and just realize there are no backups to it. And if your project team decides, hey, we really need some persistent data, it'd be much more convenient for us to have this persistent data that we can use kind of long term, talk to us and we can discuss the options with you.
Hi, Rob.
Yes, sir.
Can you clarify the path for the home directory?
Yes. So
on mine, it looks like it's
it is different than what I've got shown there. Because if you come over and I've got a directory open right now, so if I go to my home directory and do PWD, In the
Yeah.
slide, I just added this piece of it. There's actually a NICS and some letter. You could be on A, B, C, D, or E. I'm on C, and then there's a home, and then my username there.
Gotcha.
So normally this part just kind of gets left off, but it is actually there. So yes, good point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. And again, so I talked about the user environment variable. So if I were to do echo $user like I show on my slide, it just shows me what my username is. So I could do cd / nix c home, and I could use $user, and it takes me to the same place. Okay. Okay, home areas. They're good for storing your source code, your job scripts, and then small data files. It's persistent, it's got a quota, it's backed up routinely. So this is a good place to store your smaller files that you're going to use periodically, your job scripts, any source code you've got. You don't really want to store a lot of output from your files from your jobs that are running, because they can get very large. That's why the scratch area doesn't have a quota. If, for instance, you're running a job and that job produced a lot of data, let's say more than 10 gigabytes, you would hit that quota limit in your home directory and your job would die at that point. If you put it to your scratch area, if you write all your data out to your scratch area, it doesn't matter how much data you write out, up to the limit of the entire file system, 1.7 petabytes. That's why the scratch areas are useful for catching your job results. So it's your working directory. A lot of times people will see scratch directory, but it really just should say a temporary area. It's an area where your job can write out its temporary files. It can write out its data as it's running. Then ideally what you would do is you'd go through and look at all that data, pick out the pieces of that data that you really needed. And a lot of it's going to be data that you never use again. So it makes sense to just go ahead and delete that and be done with it. And then you could take that data you really need and move it somewhere else. If it's small enough, you might store it in your home directory, but that could add up quickly. It might make sense to even pull it off to your home, your own laptop or your own desktop machine. All right. It's also good for storing these larger data sets, again, temporarily. It's not persistent. And just so in your mind, when you see the word scratch, just remember it's temporary space. All right. If it's been unused data for more than 30 days, it's subject to deletion. We have a script that'll go through and it'll look at all the directories, and it'll say, oh, this file hasn't been used. They're not using this file. We will delete it. All right. The space is temporary working space, and it is not backed up. I can't emphasize that enough. So I'm starting to sound like a broken record. It is temporary space. It's temporary, it's temporary, it's temporary.
So how do you define unused? It's not accessed or?
Correct. If it's not been accessed in 30 days.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, right now, it's not much of a problem. The file system is still relatively empty. It's about 30 to 40% full at the moment. So we've got plenty of room to grow. But we are going to be doing these just to make sure that the file system doesn't get too full. We are going to start doing these periodically. Honestly, we haven't done many of those in the past year because the file system just hasn't gone that full yet. But as more and more people generate more and more data, we're just very concerned with it getting too full too fast. So we're going to make sure we try and keep the data kind of under control. You could help out and be a good citizen of the system. And if you do have unused data, you're not using it, it's just going to be thrown away, feel free to delete that data yourselves. And that way we make sure that your data that you need is not being wiped out accidentally. So help us keep that system well utilized and keep it from hitting any limits that might cause problems. Project areas. I talked a little bit about this already. So it's used to share data among project members. That's its biggest advantage. Folks that are in your project will be put in the same Unix group, which means you'll be able to share data. So we talked about permissions last time. So the permissions on files are based on you, yourself, what your username is. It's also based on what group you're in. And so when you're put into a project with other members, you'll all be put in the same group, and you'll have the same group permissions on the file in the project areas. It's a good way to share data amongst your project members. All right. if you've invested some money into the ACF and you've decided that you like to have some persistent data, so imagine you might have some genomic data that you're going to be analyzing over a period of time, maybe a year or something like that, and you like to keep that data set safe from the purges, you can invest a little bit of money and make that persistent data, and that means we won't purge it. So if the file system starts to get full, what we do first is try and wipe out any temporary data. So we go through and try and purge any data that's in the temporary space first, and usually that gets the file system back in a healthy state. In dire emergencies, if that wasn't enough, we would contact project members of the project PIs of these various projects and ask them to go through and delete out any of their data that they don't need anymore to help bring that down to a lower level. If that wasn't enough, then we'd have to go through and let the script run through and purge stuff out of project spaces. And then finally, the last thing we would do, if anybody has purchased persistent space, we would ask them to try and remove reduce their data as much as they can. And then at that point, we're just kind of stuck hoping to find more funding to make the file system bigger so that we can get the system back up and running in a healthy way. You can also, by default, project areas are not backed up, but you can also buy a backup service. And it's basically the fee is to cover an intern making sure that the backups get done every day and making sure everything is solid. All right, are there any questions on the file systems? You've got home, you have Scratch, and then optionally you have a project space, and the project space can be not by default, but you can make it persistent for persistent data, and you can have it backed up. Okay, no questions, we'll keep on going. Let's start talking about data transfer. All right, so one of the tools that we have is Globus Online. It's probably one of the better, easier tools to use. So we'll start looking at it first. To make it work, there are a couple things you'll have to ensure that are in place in your portal. So at some point, what you want to do is log in your portal. Let me pull up the portal page here. So here's my portal page. On there, there's a couple things you want to make sure. You want to look underneath your profile information here. And you want to make sure that your username and your net ID are there. This means that we've associated, which means we've mapped, this is my username in the system, which is different from my net ID. A lot of people, their net ID and their username will be the same. But in my case, I have different usernames from my net ID. If for some reason this hasn't happened, there'll be a link here, a little button that says associate my net ID with my username. There'll be a little button right there, to be a little gray button that you can click, and that's going to associate your username with your net ID. Most people probably already have this done. You just want to make sure that that is the case, that you don't have a button here saying, please associate my net ID. If you don't have that button, that means it's associated, and that's one step, and you're good to go. Then you want to scroll down a little bit further, and you want to look under this section for login information. And what you're looking for is a DN. You should have a DN that looks similar to what I have right here. This is your distinguished name, and it's this long string that we use a service called CI Logon. And it's this global logon service that allows you to use your NetID credentials to access other resources like Globus Online. And we'll take a look at that in just a second. But those are the two pieces that you'll want to look at. If you don't have one of these DNs, there is a link here that says to associate your in-common credential. Click here. That'll take you to another website. You log into that website using your NetID credentials, and then this should automatically populate your DN for you. If for some reason you have an error, let us know, and we can help you fix that. So I'm going to click this. I've already done this, so I will probably get an error, but I'm going to click it, and you should see what it looks like. So I click here. It gives me this little information about what CI Logon is. And then it's going to say hit continue. Now I've already done this, so I'm probably going to get an error. Yeah, so see, I get this error right now. If you happen to get this error, and it's a fairly common error, and we've been trying to debug it, but a lot of people get this error. Some don't, but some do. If you do get that error, what you'll need to do is come over and go to another website called cilogon.org. CILOGON.org, and hit enter. It's going to take you to the screen asking you to select an identity provider. So you're going to come down and put in University of Tennessee and say log on. And when you do that, you're going to get this subject up here. And that is your DN string. So if you get that error message, go to CI logon, copy this string that's next to certificate subject, copy that, send that to us in a ticket at help@nix.utk.edu, and we can get it set up to get it working. Okay, that's only if you get an error. Normally, if it works well the way it should, it just automatically populates your portal for you, and you'll just see it down at the bottom. And you all get to see my bad typing. That's the hard part about doing this live. People see how bad a typist I am. So if everything works well after you've clicked on the here, this should just appear magically down here, and you're good to go. If you get that error message that I just showed, just go to cilogon.org, log in using your NetID credentials, and copy that line that says certificate subject. Email that to us at help@nix.utk.edu, and we will get this put in there for you manually and get that working for you. Okay? All right, so once you've got those two things, that you've got your username, you're associated your username with your Nix account. Once that's done, once you get your DN in there correctly, then you're ready to move on and start looking at the different data transfer tools that are available. Now we have several data transfer tools that are available. Some they're all good. Some are better for different things than others, and it just kind of depends on what you need and what your goals are. Globus Online is the first one we kind of recommend for folks. It's fairly easy and straightforward. The only difficulties come into play when either your username is not associated yet or you don't have the DN. If you got those two things in place, then it's fairly easy to use Globus Online. We'll take a look at that here in just a second to show you what it looks like. It is a web interface, so you can do it all from your web browser. So it's nice, it's easy, it's a nice interface to use, and very simple to use. It gets pretty good performance. It's not the best performance, but it's reasonable performance depending on what your network connections are. We also have SCP and SFTP. They're secure. They're slower though because of their security and the fact that they encrypt a lot of the data, and the control channels is a little bit slower performance, but for smaller files, you won't notice it at all. And we can take a look at those as well. If you have the grid tools installed, and this is kind of the key of the grid tools, you have to have them installed on both ends, both on, if you're using it from your laptop, you'd have to have these tools installed on your laptop. And if you don't, you'd have to either get them installed or go someplace where they are installed to be able to do the transfers. We'll take a look at it, but for most folks, they won't have the grid tools installed on their local machines. So that's why they would be using either Globus or one of the SCP or SFTP tools. Now, the other thing you could use, of course, is the third-party clients like WinSCP and FileZilla, and there's a bunch of them out there. The ones that we've had the most success with is WinSCP for Windows, and then FileZilla is a Mac FTP client that works also. I'm not a huge fan of it, but it does work, and a lot of people do like it, so that's why I put it in there. And we can take a look at those if you'd like. So let's start, though, looking at Globus Online. So to get there, you'll go to globus.org, all right? And let me flip over to that, and we can start taking a look at that. So when you first get started, this is globus.org, and this is the page you go to when you first go into globus.org. Up in the corner, there is a button for logging in. You can click on that, and it's going to give you different options. I've already, unfortunately, logged in, so, oh, no, I haven't. That's good. So when you go to this page, it's going to say log in using the Globus web app. There's a couple of different ways you can log in. If you happen to have an Exceed account, you can use that. If you don't have an Exceed account, don't worry about it. If you've got a Google account, you can use your Google account. If you happen to have this ORCID ID or the ORC ID, you can use that to log in. If you don't have any of those, you can create a Globus ID to log in, and it's free to create that. Most people, however, do have a Google account, so you can use the Google to log in. So I click on that. I've got all kinds of Google accounts. I've got one that's my personal account. I've got a couple of work accounts. I'm going to pick just my UT Google account. So UT gives you the ability to have a Google account associated with your NetID. I've done that. I click on that. It's going to ask me for my NetID password. Once I've authenticated that service, it's then going to take me to this page. And this is where I can transfer files now. The idea behind Globus is this concept of endpoints. And endpoints is just a system where your files exist. All right. In the ACF, we've set up several endpoints. All right. If I go over and look at our web page for a moment, I'm on the NICS website, so nix.utka.edu. I've looked under computing and ACF, and that's brought me to this page. If I click on data transfer, that's going to give me all the information on how to transfer data in and out of the ACF. If I click on there, I'm going to find that there are data transfer nodes, DTNs. These are special servers that we've set up just for transferring data back and forth into the ACF. They're called datamover1.nix.utk.edu, datamover2, datamover3, datamover4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, and 4 are for using with Duo authentication. So if you're using the Duo app on your phone, you can access 1, 2, 3, or 4, datamover 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you're using RSA, and a few of you might still be using RSAs, if you are using the secure tokens from RSA, you can log into 5, 6, 7, 8. These are the preferred servers for using for data transfers because we have got our fastest connections into them. We have Lustre plugged into them. We have your home directories plugged into them. They're dedicated just for data transfers. Some of these transfers you can also do to the login nodes, but then that puts more traffic on the login nodes, and that's going to slow down the performance of login nodes. So we really prefer and encourage people to use the data movers because that's what they're designed to do, move data. All right, so if I want to use one of those, I click in the box next to endpoint. It brings up search for an endpoint. And we've named them NICS, then the #, and then data mover, whichever data mover you want. So I'm going to use my Duo app to log in. So I'm going to pick data mover 1, 2, 3, or 4. So I already see that there's data mover 1, there's 3 and 4 and 2. So I'm just going to pick data mover 1. I'm going to click on it. Now, I've logged into this in the past couple of days, so it automatically takes me into my directory on the ACF. If it didn't, it would have a button here saying, please authenticate. I would click on that button, authenticate. It would take me to another web page, and I would put in my NetID and then my NetID password. That would then authenticate me, and it would drop me into my home directory. So this is my home directory on the ACF. And it just shows me a listing of all my files that I have in the ACF. I can navigate around. I can either come up here and put in the path I want to go to. So let's say I wanted to go to my scratch space. I'd want to go to Lustre, and I want to go to Haven, and I'm going to my scratch space, and I'll put in my username. And then I'll click on the go button or just hit enter. And now this is all the files that are in my scratch space. It looks like it's probably about time for me to get a purge because I've got some crap in here. If I want to go into a particular subdirectory, I can just by clicking on it. And I can just double click it like I'm moving around in any sort of other environment. So that drops me into the different directories. I can use this button to go up a folder. So this is the same as doing a CD ... And I can navigate back and forth in these folders. I want to go in this one called UT Health Science Center. I can. Here's all the files I have there. So this is good for transferring from an endpoint to another endpoint. But the question comes up, well, the endpoint is my laptop. I want to use my laptop to be able to transfer files that are on my laptop or my desktop, and I want to move those to ACF. So what Globus has created is, if you look down here in the lower right-hand corner, there's a link to get Globus Connect Personal. If you click on that, it's going to take you through how to add this to your computer. So what you're going to do is you're going to download and install this client. You're going to create some name for your laptop or your desktop machine, whatever you want to call it, it's fine. All right. You click on that to generate a setup key, and then you're going to download whichever client you're using. So if you're on Linux or Mac or Windows, you download that software on your computer. And once you do that, you will then have an endpoint yourself. So I've created an endpoint for myself, and I called it BMW because those are my initials. And I have one called BMW Laptop. If I click on that, that's a listing of all the files that are currently on my laptop. And I can navigate through all those files just like I could anywhere else. I double click on my desktop, and here's all the files that are on my desktop. I can go up a folder if I want to. The other thing you might even notice, I've got some Dropbox folders. So with those Dropbox folders, I can even access my Dropbox through here. So here's a way for me to transfer stuff from my Dropbox to the ACF and vice versa. So let's go to my desktop for a second. And let's imagine I want to transfer a file from the ACF over to my computer. What I want to do is just find the file. So I could just pick on this one. This is just a file I made up. It's 1 gigabyte big, so it's a gigabyte file. I can select multiple files if I want to. I can hold in the shift key and pick multiple files. I can hold in the control key to pick out random files out of that whole list. Or I can just pick out one file. Once I picked out a file to transfer, you'll notice this arrow has now lit up. If I click on that, what it's going to do is it's going to transfer that file from here over into my desktop. So it's just going to put it on my desktop, and I can see it on my desktop on my Mac. So I hit the button, and now it's going to say transfer request has been successfully. It gives me a task ID. What I can do now at this point is I could turn off my laptop, I could go home, I could do anything I want to. It's transferring in the background, so I don't have to sit here and wait. At some point when it transfers, it's going to send me an email letting me know that file has been transferred. Well, if I'm kind of impatient, I want to see what's going on, I can click on activity, and it's going to tell me that it is transferring. It looks like it's about halfway done right now. Tell me if this transfer started a few seconds ago. If I want to find more information about this, I just click on it, and it gives me a whole lot of information. It gives me the task ID, who did this, the source, the destination. It's an active transfer going on right now. And I can see by the status bar, it looks like it's about halfway done. So, that's a pretty good transfer rate. But again, I don't have to sit here and watch it. I can go off and go do something else. I can submit more jobs. I can do whatever I want to. I can come back to transfer files if I want to go and get more files to transfer one way or the other. Just like before, if I wanted to pick another file, let's say I wanted to pick, I don't know, let me pick this one here. Let's say I want to transfer this file to the ACF. Well, I can do that too. It gives me yet another transfer request. I can look at activity again, see what's going on. It's showing me all the requests that I have going on. And this one's a smaller file, so it looks like it's catching up pretty quick. You can transfer single files. You can transfer directories. You can transfer multiple directories at a time, multiple files at a time. It's a very powerful, easy to use web-based tool if you get those two things squared away on your portal page, which is making sure that your username is associated correctly and that you have that D in. I just got an email, I don't know if you happen to see that pop up there, but an email just popped across the top of my screen telling me that it's now transferred. I'm not sure which one it was. So my little file transferred from my laptop over the ACF very quickly, and it was transferring at a speed of about 48 bytes per second. So it was a very small file, it was only 542, and it went very fast. The other file is still transferring away, so it'll be done when it gets done, and I'll get another email telling me it's done. Again, I don't have to sit here and watch or wait, it just happens automatically. Okay. All right, that is Globus. Are there any questions on Globus? Once you get it set it up, it is the easiest, and we really prefer for folks to use it because it is easy and it just works most times once you get those two things squared away. All right. If no questions, we'll move on.
One question here.
Yes.
Sorry, I was trying to follow up, and you might have mentioned this already. What is the transfer speed you can expect from Globus?
So usually it's good, but it's not great. We've seen it to get somewhere in the neighborhood of about 600 or 700 megabytes per second.
Okay, that's pretty good.
It's pretty good. It's not the best we've seen, but it is pretty good. So it is more than reasonable, And right now I'm on kind of a slower connection right now because I'm a little surprised that 1 gigabyte hasn't already transferred. Usually it'd be done in just a matter of about 30 seconds or so.
607 is what I usually get when I use SCP.
Yeah. So so let's see what it actually did. And so this is the one that was 1 gigabytes. Yeah, that one's hitting about 5.61. Usually I'll see closer to like 45, so it's a little slow today. I don't know. I guess it's Friday afternoon and everybody's on my network right now. But usually we've seen closer to like 40, 45. I've seen like 86 or something like that a couple of times. So I think it depends a lot on the time of the day and the connection speeds that are going on. I notice even at my house in the afternoons, apparently everybody's watching Netflix on the afternoon. So apparently everybody gets Friday afternoon except for me.
Robert?
Yes, sir.
This is Dan over at UT.
Hey, Dan.
I've got a DTN set up.
Okay.
And, I've got some test files, and I get 4.5 gigabits per
You
second.
got a better connection I've got.
Yeah. So
yeah. Okay. Great.
Once they get the files transferred up there, to the DTN, they should be able to push them out at 4.5 gigabits a second.
All right, 4.5 gigabits. So that is from you guys there in Memphis to here in Knoxville. So that's a great transfer rate. Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Now, has everybody got access to that DTN?
If they don't, they just they need to let me know.
Okay.
I believe Hal does, and several others.
Excellent.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Awesome. Dan, I'm really happy you called in today. All right, everybody heard that. If you have any trouble at all, call Dan. Oh, wait. I guess for DTN stuff. All right. Anybody got any other questions? All right, let's move on then. All right, we do have SCP and SFTP. So we looked at SCP. So basically the syntax is SCP, the command, space whatever file that you like to copy, and you're going to send it to one of the data movers. And you'll create some file on the remote system. So let's take a look at that real quick. So if I'm in my terminal here, so I am in, let me go to my computer. So this is my computer. I'm going to my desktop. Oh, wait. I was looking at my desktop. So I'm on my desktop. And let's say there's a file I want to copy. Let's say I want to copy this sample.fa file. So I can SCP the name of that file, which is sample.fa. I'm going to copy it to my home directory, let's say. So I'm going to copy it to my account. MRWhip4. I'm going to use Duo. So I'm going to go to the duo.acf.utk.edu, and I put in the colon, and I tell it where do I want that file to go. I can give it a new name if I wanted to. I could call it sample2.txt if I wanted to, whatever, doesn't matter. Or if I just want to keep it the same name, I could just put dot. And since the first place I go to when I log into the machine is my home directory, that just means I'm going to copy this into my home directory. So I'm going to copy this SCP, I'm going to copy the sample.fa file just into my home directory on the ACF. I hit enter on that. It's going to, are you sure you want to connect to this? I'm going to say yes, I'm sure I want to. It's going to ask me for my NetID password, so I put that one in. Then it's going to ask me to either put in a passcode or do a duo push. So I'm going to do the duo push. My phone's going to light up, and it's going to ask me, do I approve of this request? I approve that request, and it's going to start copying the file. And then this one went by very quickly, only 2.2 gigabytes per second. It's a small file, and went quick. If I go over and now look in my home directory over here on ACF, and here I am in my home directory, I should see sample.fa, and there it is. So that's SCP. It's easy to do. It's a good command line tool. It's secure. It is a little bit slower. Small files you never notice, but if it's a larger file, you notice it takes quite a while to transfer larger files sometimes. Again, it depends on the connection. I say that, but if you guys are getting, close to, 4 or 5 gigabytes a second, you're doing a lot better than I am here on my connection. All right. We also have, if you're using RSA, it would be the exact same thing, except this is going to be your username. It could have been your net ID. You do that to data mover 5 or 8. So over here, just do that. Let me do that to the data mover. I just used the login server, which I shouldn't have done. So what I really should have done was copy this to the data mover. I just gave you all a bad example. Sorry. You really want to copy this to, instead of duo.acf, because that's a login server. What you really should have done, what I should have done, is send it over to one of the data movers. And since I'm going to use duo, I need to go 1, 2, 3, or 4. So I'm going to use 4 at .nix.utk.edu. And again, it's going to put me in my home directory because my home directories are mounted to this data mover 4. When I hit enter, I should get the same kind of thing. Ask me if I want to connect. It's going to ask for my password again. And then it's going to ask for a passcode or a push. I select push. My phone buzzes at me. It tells me to approve. Let's see if I get, yeah, I got even faster performance into the data mover. Not by much, because it's still a small file. It's only 118 bytes long, so it goes really quickly. But it is a faster to do it to the data mover. Okay. So that was SCP. We also have secure file transfer protocol. Same kind of thing. You'd log into one of the data movers. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Should have said 4 there. SFTP, your net ID at that. And then that's going to take you into the FTP. So I do SFTP. And then I want to go to my username. And I'm going to go to, let's do data mover. I tried 1 and I tried 4. So let's try 3 now. Ask me, are you sure you want to connect? I'm saying, yeah, I'm sure. It's going to ask for my net ID password again. It's going to ask for a passcode option. I'm going to push. My phone buzzes at me. I approve that connection. And now I'm connected. And you'll notice my prompt now says SFTP. So it's a different prompt, which means I'm now inside the SFT program. And the commands I put in now are SFTP commands. So if I need help with SFTP, I can type help. And that gives me a list of all the commands that I can use in this FTP shell. If I do ls, that'll tell me what files are on my remote machine. So I'm on my laptop. I've logged into the ACF remotely. And now it's telling me all the files that I currently have on my remote directory. If I want to know what directory I'm in, I can type pwd. And this is the remote directory that I'm in. I'm in my home directory. If I want to know where I'm at on my local computer, I can say L for local, print working directory. And now it tells me that I'm on my desktop folder on my computer locally. If there's a file I want, so imagine I wanted to get a file. Let me pick one. Let's say I wanted this temp.f file. What I could say is I want to get temp.f. And now it has copied this file, nixc whitnar tempf, to temp.f. So that's going to put it into my desktop. So on my desktop, I should be able to see temp.f. So if I do a local ls, it's going to show me all the directories that are in my home directory, on my desktop directory on my local machine. And there's my temp.f. So it did copy that over. If there's a file that I want to copy over to the ACF, I'm still logged in. So if I do my pwd, it's going to tell me I am in nixc home witten r. That's my home directory in the ACF. Let's say I want to put that file. So if I want to put that file from here to over there, I use the command called put temp.f and just hit enter. And now it uploads tempf to my home directory. And it went really fast because it's an empty file. Again, if you need help will give you help on SFTP. If you're done, you can use the quit command, and that quits you out of SFTP. And now I'm back on my local machine in my desktop directory. All right, if you have, hey Dan, do you guys have the grid tools installed? Do you have GSI, SCP, and grid FTP?
I started to get them installed. I'm not sure if I have them installed or not. I
Gotcha.
have.
Okay, well, eventually when that gets installed, you guys will be able to use these tools, GISCP and then GSI SFT. They work exactly the same, except you put GSI in front of them and then SCP, and the syntax is the exact same. Same thing with GSI SFTP. You put in GSI FTP, and it takes you directly into it now, an SFTP, but it's under the grid tools. These tools we found to be the fastest. We found these tools to be the fastest. The other nice thing about them is they can use X509 certificates. With just a little bit of work, you can set up and do these in your shell scripts. So it allows access without having to enter your user ID and your password every time. So if you happen to have a script and you're trying to automate some of this stuff and moving things back and forth, we can take you through that when you're ready. Once you guys get the grid tools installed, we can do another training if need be, or we can work with you guys one-on-one. What you'll do is you'll get a copy of your certificate file. You'll put it in your home directory under this special directory called Globus. You'll change some permissions. You'll run this thing called grid proxy in it, and then you can transfer files back and forth without having to put in your password and user ID all the time. In automated scripts, that's very handy. So imagine you set up an automated script to copy important files off the ACF back to your laptop every day or every week or whatever. You can set that up, and then you don't have to be there and manually put in your user ID and your password all the time. So when you get there, we'll definitely show you how to do it. In the meantime, if you get everything installed, you can go to our page and look under the data transfer tools, and we've documented that fairly well. All these things we talked about today, the different data transfer protocols. We've documented how to use grid FTP. We've looked at the web data transfer way of doing things. And then down further, we've got the whole thing listed about how you can do all this thing automatically without having to put in your data and all your username and password all the time. So we have documentation out there that explains all this. If you guys get ready and you have a need for doing some automated data transfers back and forth, send us a help ticket, and we'll work with you one-on-one to get it set up to make sure everybody get their data transfer back and forth the way you'd like. Okay. All right. So again, X509 certificates is, you'll hear that term a lot. That just means you'll have a certificate that you're going to put in your home directory, and it allows you to transfer stuff back and forth kind of automatically without having to worry about putting your username and password all the time. I'm going to switch over here for just a second to a Windows machine. And we have, I've got a utility on mine called WinSCP. This is free. You can download it, put it on your Windows machine. And what it is, it allows you to do SCP to any of the machines you like to. So for instance, if you want, I can go in here and I'm going to use data mover. I'm going to use my Duo again. Let's go to data mover 3. I haven't picked on that one yet. And I got to put in my I'm going to put in all that, and I click on login. It's going to tell me to continue. If I scroll down, I'm going to continue on that. Now it's asking for, do I want to put in a passcode or do a push? I'm going to do a push again. My phone buzzes. I approve that connection request. Now over here is all my files again. This is on my home directory. And over here are all my files underneath my desktop on my computer. So here's my computer over here. Here's ACF over here. I can move around just like I did before. I can move directories up and down. If I want to go up, I can hit the dot dot. That takes me up. And in a second, it's going to pull up that directory. Just like before, it's going to show me files on both sides, both remote and locally. This is very similar to what Globus gives you, except this is utility that you're going to have on your own Windows machine. and it's running slow right now. But once it does that, I can then just drag those files back and forth, whichever way I want them to go. And for some reason, it's slow right now, so I'm having a rough day on my connection. But when that pops up, I could just copy a file by just dragging over one way or the other. So yeah, so now I'm back. I'm gonna go back in my directory. I'll just copy something from there. So let me come down here and just grab any file I want. I'm gonna drag that over and I'm gonna drop it in my desktop. Now I just copied over to my desktop. I'll take this one. I just click and drag and drop it over my desktop. That's WinSCP. If you're curious, FileZilla does much the same thing. So there's those files I just copied over. So FileZilla is the same thing except for Macintosh. You can download that if you like to use it on the Mac. If you're on a Windows machine, WinSCP is a nice graphical SCP. All right, available software. So you can get a listing of all the available software that we've installed at this website here, which is on our website underneath computing, underneath ACF. And then you click on software. And my connection's slow. Here we go. And here's all the available software that we have currently installed. And you can look at it either in alphabetical or you can switch to category view. And we've kind of subdivided it into different areas. So like bioinformatics, CFD, machine learning, material science. This is a list of all the software that we currently have installed on the machine. While you're on the machine, if you're logged in, you can use the module command to see what's available. So if you happen to be logged into the machine, one of the ACF machines, if you do module avail, it'll give you a complete listing of all the software that's available to you as a module. So for instance, like Alinea, GCC, Hadoop, all the Intel compilers. We have a pretty comprehensive list of a little over 100 applications installed right now. We have R installed. We have both R by itself. We also have Anaconda, which includes the R package and the Python package. We have Python packages installed. We have R packages installed. GNU plot, Python, QExpresso, Kime. We have all kinds of software installed. If there's something on there that you need, there's a couple ways you can go about it. You can install it yourself. So module value tells what's installed. The website module value tell you what is installed currently. You can request software. If it's something that only you are going to use, it's just something you've seen that you're kind of interested in, we recommend you just install it yourself in your home directory or in your Scratch directory. We already have a lot of R and Python packages installed, but you can install those yourself. So for Python, for instance, you can do pip -install, name of package, -- user, and then it'll just install it for you. In R, you can do the same thing. You can go in R, you can type install.packages, and then put in the package you want to install, and that installs it for you. But we already have a lot of these installed, so you could look and see if it's already installed in Python or R, and that might save you a little bit of trouble. What we've noticed is a lot of people will find a piece of software they're not even sure they're really wanting to use. They just want to test it out. So feel free to install that, and if you need help, we're more than happy to help you install that. If it's something that we think, and you think, and we agree with you that a lot of people might use it, we'll install it globally to make it available through the module system. And I have like 3 minutes left. Do you guys have any questions I can answer for you?
Bobby,
Yes, ma'am.
in addition to the video recordings of these, are there going to be like written instructions available?
Well, since you've asked for it, sure, why not?
Thanks.
What kind of instructions would you like to see? And so a lot of it's already on our website. Would pointers to the website articles help, or?
Yeah, pointers would help.
Okay.
I missed last week's webinar, unfortunately, so I'm going to be trying to do some catch-up work.
Okay, I have not posted last week's recording yet. I'll try and do that this afternoon, and it'll be here in the event archive. I have posted the the second day of webinar. I've got the third day of webinar I need to post this afternoon, and then I'll try and post this one this afternoon also. So I'll post those this afternoon.
Thanks. I was just thinking that, sometimes you have an hour and you can set aside and sit through something, and sometimes you want to just find one piece of it.
Sure. Yeah.
Robert, this is Dan.
Hey, Dan.
I just checked. The GSI SCP is installed on our
Okay.
DTN.
Okay, good. Great. So again, it's the same syntax as SCP, except you just put GSI in front of it. Your file to whichever data mover you want to go to, and then what file you want to create on the other system. This is if you're using Duo, and if you're using RSA, you use 5 through 8. Great. Thanks, Dan. Other questions? If there are no other questions, we will call it quits. Thanks everyone for attending. We'll meet again next week, same time, same channel. If you have any questions, you can email me. You can email help@nix.utka.edu. Check out our website. I'll try and get these recordings put out there this afternoon. If not, I'll get them posted over the weekend. Thanks everybody for attending. Everybody have a fantastic weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks. You have a good weekend.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.